Oh, good. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Today we have like a very special event with a very special guest, Muthu, as Muthukrishnan. So let's take a seat and let's get started. So, well, Muthu has like a very long career in computer science, in academia, and also in industry. Kind of, he graduated from NYU, and then he was a professor at Rutgers. He spent time in many places, including Bell Labs. He was for a very long time at Google. We're going to talk about his time at Google, but lately, since 2008, he has been in Amazon. He's a vice president of sponsored products. So we're going to get into different stages. And the plan for today, again, is more have like an informal conversation. That's the purpose of this fireside chat, where we're going to go through kind of Muthu's experiences, talk about the past, the present, and the future of advertising. And also kind of we're going to open it from the audience. We're also going to hear a little bit from you. So let's get started from very early, from the early days of advertising. And kind of Muthu is unique in the sense that he was involved in the development of the ad exchanges. So if you're familiar with ad exchanges, are now that markets that are now very mature, in which advertisers and publishers, they have opportunity to trade impression ad slots in real time. And we take this for granted right now, but back in the day, this was a new coming thing. So can you tell us a little bit about those times?
Thank you. Like an imposter, nice to have friends who can still pull me into the community. I think that we go back a long time.
Yeah.
I remember, some of you may remember that there used to be this notebook from Bell Labs. It's a little blue cover top notebook. And I remember when I was putting a lot of things away recently, I saw this notebook from 1996. I had these two words written on it. Called Internet Advertising. I'm circled.
1996.
Yeah. And I like to believe that it was like my plastics moment. Okay, but it wasn't. No, it really wasn't. I was lucky to get folded in by John Feldman, Martin Powell, and all the others. And then I got to learn from a bunch of people here. And I thought I should tell you first, before I get to the ad exchange, that I think the first thing we worked on was how to bid on behalf of advertisers, which is one of the titles I see, Autobidding. That's the first thing that I worked on. And it was sort of a plethora of online knapsack problems. There were a bunch of things I worked on which didn't work out. I think we were working on newspaper advertising. We thought we would really improve newspaper advertising, and we thought we would save New York Times. And at least we told them that it would save New York Times. So they had this little New York Times dispenser next to my office. So they'd come in the morning and take a New York Times in my office and read them. Unfortunately, we couldn't save them. That marketplace didn't work. It was a negotiation-based marketplace online. It didn't really work very well. And then I think started working on this real-time trading for ads, and that's when you and I worked together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the first time we thought about trading every opportunity to show an ad, or every time a viewer did something on the web, but it's any activity at all, we have an opportunity to show an advertising. And first time we thought we would do this by doing real-time bidding and auctions. The question I remember being asked was, do you think you'll make enough money to pay for the electricity it's going to cost? I wasn't sure we could make enough money. These were pennies, and it's the number of machines we were using. I have a feeling that Google uses more machines now than we used to use that time. Data centers, machines, hydroelectric power. I wasn't sure we had enough electricity costs to pay for trading each impression, but apparently we do. Yeah, but I think the question still remains, right? I mean, with GenAI, it's not clear that we have the ability to pay for the electricity and get the returns.
Now, hopefully we're going to become more efficient with time. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. Yeah. So you mentioned like kind of a lot of challenges that arise there on the early days, and here you were creating a market almost from scratch, no? Because you inherit something from DoubleClick, but kind of taking that to the Google scale. I imagine that a lot of things like kind of that you think about in paper, but then when you're trying to make it a reality, there are a lot of engineering challenges there. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. I think the community here, I mean, you know a lot about this. I remember Rakesh Vora and others got involved and thought a lot about interesting problems. Just when you're trying to trade every opportunity to show an ad or sell an impression, you have this sellers and you have the buyers in two-sided marketplaces. And the people here in the audience will probably, far better experts than I on being able to think about all this. But one of the advantages was we had to do the business. And when you're trying to do the business, whether you work out all the math or not, you got to find a way to get the business to work. And working on all these things like newspaper advertising taught me that there is no way to make these two-sided marketplaces work unless you had a large buyer and a large seller of both sides. And the first thing we did was try to have Google as a buyer in this marketplace. And that was probably the biggest difference between DoubleClick and the exchange that we built at the time. I had to tell you that I didn't like the fact that after we built this exchange, it was called DoubleClick Exchange rather than Google Exchange. But there's just many, many interesting questions that happen when you have this. The buyer represents many buyers, and there's this whole network effect that you looked at very deeply.
Yeah.
And I still remember that one of the most unusual questions that came up was that there's a exchange that's running this operations where this Times, the publisher, is trying to sell the impressions, and a bunch of people are trying to buy it. And one of the buyers was Google, and one of the sellers was Google. And I remember that Michael Rabin visited me at the time. I don't know if you recall, but we overlapped with him. He's just a remarkable intellectual brain, and he wanted to run each auction such that anybody could verify that the bids were considered correctly and the outcome was fair, no matter who the players were. It was like a zero knowledge proof kind of thing. I was fascinated by the topic. And I never thought about the problem. And I thought if there was such an issue, we can always solve it in a business, legal way. But he formed it as a mathematical problem, technical problem, and designed interesting solutions. Noam Nissan was there at the time, Shai Mansour, and we had this very interesting work. And again, at the time, the question was, our solution used a small trusted machine and a very large amount of storage. And I remember thinking, are we going to be able to pay for this? It wasn't clear at the time. I remember talking to Avi Wigderson, and he said, oh, you know what, you're Google, you can pay for it. Yeah, I don't think it was true. It's still a very complex solution that we had. And I think since then, people have worked on so many things about these marketplaces and made them efficient, right? I mean, it's really remarkable. Look at the groups in these research labs, the level of collaboration. And actually, maybe stuck with collaboration. The computer scientists, algorithms people learn how to work with machine learning people. Algorithms people learn how to work with economists. I don't think it was a two-way thing. I think it was a one-way thing. But I'm very excited by the technology that came out of it. Okay. I'm not talking about the system challenges because, we can go into it if you're interested. But I think the business that gave us a system that all of us could reason about, write papers about, think about, and solve complicated problems. I think that's the exciting thing for this community.
Yeah, and also the world was different back then than today, as you mentioned. That before it was like silos of people with one expertise working about this problem, but now it's more multidisciplinary in many ways. You know that here, you think about EC today, we have people coming from economics, people coming from computer science, operations, and this is like kind of very multidisciplinary world we live right now. So that's something that perhaps is different today than it was back then.
Yeah, it's probably the case that every community, every generation thinks that there are some new connections they need to make, and it's probably true now. But there were early times for me, I was often in uncomfortable places, in meetings with people who didn't speak my language, and nearly every conversation I would go, every conference I'd go to, was some kind of community telling me how to do things. I still remember an atheist talk once saying, we're going to tell this computer scientist how to run auctions. There's a lot of learning.
Yeah, good. So let's move a little bit forward in time and let's talk about your time at Amazon. So you moved there 2019 after spending a very successful time at Google. Now, everybody is familiar with Amazon. Everybody is familiar with Google. So you use Amazon most likely for retailing, but Amazon, as of today, one of the largest advertisers, and there are lots of different opportunities for sellers to advertise. And then Amazon itself, it is very different in the sense that you think about an ecosystem where the advertisers are the sellers themselves who are selling the product over there, and you want to sell your product to these consumers. So even though we do advertising there, it's different as an ecosystem to Google or to Microsoft, the other traditional advertising, because it's more like an open ecosystem. Can you speak a little bit about the world in Amazon and the challenges that appear there?
Yeah, I think that many of you here would just look at online advertising as somebody searching for something, and there are these people who want to show ads in response to search. So you look at what keywords they're looking at, and what's interesting to the advertiser, and maybe things like click-through prediction to see what are the chances that the person who's searching for something would find this ad interesting or useful, and then try to run an auction, which is well thought about, very well explored in the community. And to some extent, I think that abstraction is great for this community. You can really simplify the context, and then you can look at strategic aspects, learning aspects, approximation aspects. If you look at Amazon, at one level, maybe 30,000 feet, that view still applies. People still go to Amazon and search for something. In return for that sort of search, they expect to see products that matches the search. And at that level, they could imagine that if you advertise, it's very similar to what you would imagine a mental model for our research papers. But it's just so far from what Amazon has to do, because nobody goes to Amazon and says, I want a button-down shirt with stripes. And nobody says that, right? They go and say shirts. Yeah, they don't go and say 3D pen for less than $20 in color blue. They just say gifts. Yeah. And and then they look around, right? And if you're like anything like me, I start looking for 3D pens for $1, and after about 15 clicks, I buy a tiara or something like that. So this is shopping. And many of us in the community probably don't even want to shop. And I remember, I remember that one of my earliest challenges working in advertising, online advertising, was I would go and talk to people in our community. I'd say I'm online advertising, and they'll say, you know what? I don't like advertising. I don't click on it. So what I did once, I don't know if you remember, I had to give a workshop or some sort of talk in Fox, or the theory conferences. So for a few weeks before the theory conference, I ran an AdWords campaign in Google on Fox, and invited talks and speakers and everything. And I had set up my landing page. And then when I went to the conference, I could say, I know you guys say you're not clicking on ads, but here are the 178 people who clicked on it. The same thing with shopping, right? Most of us, oh no, I don't like shopping. But you're like, oh, look at the watch. What's the watch? Oh, somebody bought it for me. But it's a branded watch, it's a branded shoe, it's a branded, sneakers, jeans, or glasses. So shopping is.
What about those shirts? Those shirts, you don't buy them on Amazon.
These are made for.
Where can I get those? Sorry for interrupting.
Possible. So somehow when you think about, somebody saying, look, I like a shirt like Muthu's or something like that, and walking them through to a place where you can actually find something that they're willing to pay, buy, find it useful, return it, and then come back and buy more. You have to think about long-term about what the shopper wants and does. And they buy because I start with looking for gifts for my daughter, like 3D pens, and then I'm looking at what do other people buy when they look at 3D pens. If they look at tiaras, they buy diaries, they buy, unicorn statues, whatever, dolls. And we use many of these cues to shop for things. And somehow the advertising that we had to do has to fit into that world. So you don't expect somebody to come in and say, button-down shirt, the bestseller, cheapest price, and then say, well, we got one item for you, right? The answer isn't, unlike shopping in a physical store, my favorite example is something like French press. I don't know how many of you use French press to make coffee, but if you go to a local store, there are usually 3 brands of French press coffee. One is a Bodum brand, a couple of others. But if you come to Amazon, we have like 180,000 coffee machines. They come in different colors, different material, handle, glass. So you have to help people discover products, whether they care about brands, whether they care about price, they care about deal, they care about design. And advertising has to keep that view in mind. And this is my favorite part, because then you're not trying to tell them that sell one thing. You're going to sell them over the whole year, several years. And so you have to think long term. And it goes back to some of you may know that Amazon has something called leadership principles, and it's a good way to think about business. It goes to customer obsession. You had to think about shoppers over a long period of time and see how ads can fit in there. And when you do that, nearly every experience you design is different from search advertising, and that leads to new problems.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned about the principle. Another principle is growth on Amazon indirectly, So then I want to share with you some figures about like Amazon advertising, that just to give you a sense that they have revenues of almost 47 billion in 2023. Billions, 2023. And not only that, but they grew like 4 times in 5 years. It's not only the level, but the amount and the speed at which they grew. And now they represent like 13 or almost 14% of the digital ad spend in the US. So like Amazon now is one of the most important ad platforms in some way. Now, imagine like kind of growing the business in such a scale. Again, Amazon is great at management in scale, but then this also introduced like new challenges in this area. So can you speak a little bit to those challenges that you face at growing that business?
Well, there are, again, the high-level business challenges, and then there are the technical challenges. I'll again start with the whole customer first kind of thing, right? You had to think about one shopper at a time. And I think that I think many of your shoppers, even no disclaimers, and so you can think about what it takes to repeatedly help you find the right things. Okay. There's another part of a customer, which is the people who sell. And part of developing the business is to see how to help them get returns. You need sellers to be able to sell the product so they can get the returns to invest on new products and then bring them to marketplace so people can find the selection. And so you're constantly thinking about the entire supply chain, right? You would know when a new product is going to come in, when the old product is going to be a fulfillment center, when they're trying to get rid of the fulfillment center, when they're running a deal, when they're trying to. So you got to think through that part of the economics. And then the biggest thing is the uncertainty in the world. Presumably, people can do a lot of online activities or staying in contact with friends, looking for important things through Google search, and no matter how the economy is. But for something like Amazon, if the world economy is not a great place, then people can't really afford to buy things. Then people can't afford to manufacture things. If you can't move goods, we kind of, people wouldn't be able to have a viable marketplace where all this is transacted. And so you're constantly thinking about all of this when you're planning how to grow the business. What are the uncertainties? What are the best predictions? How much room you have in the marketplace? And so those are the business challenges or product challenges. And I'm not sure many people would be interested in that aspect, but it's sort of important because you mentioned the growth. Yeah. We can get to technical problems if you,
Can you give us one technical problem that you find it interesting?
Well, I don't know if you want to get to GenAI, but one of the well, let me separate it out. If you want to just talk about general technical problems that are of the type that EC community would.
We can talk about that later.
So here is a question. Yeah, right. Here is I mentioned that we should think about long term. I mentioned that we should think about both shoppers and advertisers or sellers. I mentioned that we think about the world economy. So one of the questions that we struggle with technically is that if we think of all of advertising as an MDP, some sort of a state diagram that you're trying to track, every change we make, such as, so my team might say, look, the best way to help shoppers is not just say, here are advertisements, but say things like more products from this brand, or say things like, hey, here are the things on deals today or discount today. These are new experiences, you're inventing them. And so my team might say, look, I want to do that. Okay, all right. Then people would say, oh, run an experiment. How do you run an experiment where you're trying to figure out what's the impact of this a year from now or 2 years from now? How do you run an experiment when you're trying to figure out what's the impact on the supply chain of the sellers and vendors that come to us? So first you have to predict this long-term returns in that state. And then you're trying to make a decision on which is the right way to go. And all the MDP would tell you that you have to go to the state that gives the best long-term return in some discounted way. Let's accept that. Now you have to instantiate this and build this. It's really hard. Every one of these machine learning problems is hard. Every one of the optimization problems is hard. You have to think about how much can you simulate out in the future, how much you can approximate it. And so just full of technical problems of this type. And you can choose to approach it as purely algorithmic problem. You can choose to approach it as purely an implementation problem. Okay. And when I say implementation, if we talk about GenAI, we're going to come to this, right? Ultimately, all of this are going to be done in specialized hardware. So at some point, even creating each of these goods, each impression involves hacking compilers, hacking our GPUs. And it's really remarkable when we have these people come and say, well, I did this. How do you do this? Well, I hacked a fast Fourier transform in a GPU to get this done because we're looking at too many of these ads. That's the level of technology we need to solve these problems. Okay. So I'm not trying to abstract formal theoretical problems, but I think that this mental model is something I've not heard a lot before, which is how do you simulate an economic system over some period of time that gives you confidence that you can make decisions, that you're doing something good for long term.
Do you think we're there yet, or we're going to be there in? in the short term? Or you don't want to make a
This is
prediction?
the way we think about it.
Okay.
But I think I would love to see the research community address this question.
Yeah.
I think there's enough in the structure of what you're seeing in the world with foundation models that I think some of this can be addressed. I don't think we address it really in research. I think what you're seeing are efficient working solutions, but I love to see some structure of thinking that something like people in this community can produce for that.
So let's get deeper into the machine learning, going back, gravitating a little bit towards Amazon. And I want to share with you a quote from Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, where machine learning actually plays a key role in Amazon. And Andy Jassy, the CEO, recently revealed that a large chunk of the brand's advertising was in fact led by machine learning practitioners who were figuring out the right products to put in front of people so that it doesn't even feel like it's advertising to them. No? And then you have been like kind of having this leadership position in the last decade, and you have seen like how like machine learning become more and more prominent in this world. So can you speak a little bit like kind of starting like from those baby machine learning models that people were using, remember logistic regression to make predictions, that right now they look like kind of very primitive to the models that we have seen now, and how like these have been embedded in all our lives.
So I'm not an expert on this. So whatever I talk would be somewhat high level. But I took one mental model I carried with me for a long time is often in algorithms or even in research in general, you like to isolate a situation where you know the inputs and what the output should be, and then you can really analyze it, design methods on it. And to a large extent, early days, I approached machine learning that way. Said that there will be some inputs, and then you'll predict something. And then I remember people would say, well, it's all about figuring out features. And then once you have features, you can build this logistic regression. And then I remember having a conversation with some of the machine learning experts, and somebody telling me that, anything that you can put it as an input, you can predict that too. And I don't think you need any of this intermediate features. I don't think you need any of the rules. We used to abstract problems of saying, here is a rule, and then I abstract a problem to solve. And here is a set of features, and then I abstract a prediction problem. And I remember, early on, this machine learning expert sort of talking to me over dinner and explaining to me that in their view of the world, all these are all predictable. And you should never abstract this. You should never modularize the problem this way. Right? Now, looking back, everything makes sense, right? And I can think of everything as deep learning and think of, why would you need intermediate labels? Why would you think about this? And, why would we even say predict CTR and then multiply the bid? Why would you not predict the whole ranking, whole pricing, and whole sequence? And it's really remarkable that that's the world that came about. Right? And I'm, the reason I said I'm not an expert on this is because it's like self-driving cars. I still feel nervous taking my hands off these things. I still want to abstract. I still want to say, let's assume that the AI will predict something for me, and then can I prove a theorem about how approximate my output would be under the circumstances, right? And I would still argue that we're not very good with ranking problems. I don't think we're very good with pricing problems using purely ML techniques. But I think that transformation is very exciting for me. Okay. We don't do rules. We don't do intermediate labels. And it's huge. It just changes the way we do everything.
Yeah.
It's still scary, but it changes.
Definitely a little bit scary, but also exciting at the same time. No?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more like generative AI in particular. Then again, Amazon on its own is embracing generative AI across like many different surfaces, going from Alexa, summarizing reviews, and even like kind of weird talking about with somebody on support, most likely you're not talking with a human anymore. You're talking with a machine. So then, and in the context of GenAI for advertising, that's something that we're going to talk about later. We'll have a panel going to go deeper. But what are your thoughts on two things here? Like one thing is like how we can use generative AI to improve advertising. On the other is like how you think about GenAI as a content itself. How will you merge advertisers there?
Again, to me, it seems like there's a very small collection of people who actually are the core technology of GenAI. And then there's a vast mushroom of people who use it. I think I'm in the tip of the mountain. It's really surprising. I was just before the tax day, I was having sushi, and then there's a guy sitting next to me, and he heard me speak something about GenAI. He says, "You know what? I got off my entire tax advice team, 8 people. I don't need them. GenAI was giving me better tax advice." I was looking at him, and he had polished black shoes and leather shoes. If that means anything to anybody. Okay, he was a financial hedge fund guy, right? It's interesting that it got very quickly to that stage. For me, an exciting moment was my daughter liked Morse code, and she said, "Daddy, can you make a puzzle with Morse code?" And I said, "All right, I'll make a crossword puzzle with Morse code." And I'm like, "Can you make a crossword puzzle with Morse code?" Systems comes and says, "Well, do you want Morse code in the hints or do you want it in the responses?" I said, "Oh, maybe a little bit of both." "All right, do you want it 16, 24, what size?" "Maybe 16, she's a 9-year-old. "All right, here it is." Like, "Okay, can you give it to me in LaTeX format?" "Sure, here it is." It is amazing, right? It's really amazing. It's a combination of not just a generative language model, but also a generative action model. It captures all the other things that you could call and get it done. And I'm really excited by it. Yeah. I see many of us using it. So what I gave you are an example of how I use it as a human being, but in technical world, we use it. I'm sure everybody in every company is using it for anything they can, whether it is tech support or whether it is analyzing their experiments or just better click prediction, just better indexing, show using that. But it feels like about 1995. Right? It feels like
Wild West.
There is the web, and we're still waiting for the AOL and Yahoo and Google and other companies. That's my lens, but maybe a wrong lens. But it seems like we're still waiting for the "you got mail" moment.
Yeah, definitely it's an exciting time. Very exciting time. So again, we're going to open it for questions from the audience first, but before doing so,
I do have some technical questions. I should at least give you one technical question on GenAI.
Yeah, you have one. Yeah.
Just to be clear, I think that there's so much fascination about this, but we have to do real things, and for real things, we still have many, many hard algorithmic problems we need to solve. At the core of all of this nonlinear optimization, at the core of all of this hashing, nearest neighbors, for God's sake, nearest neighbors, we're still hacking all these things in hardware. And 20 years of looking at GPUs, we still don't have a great algorithmic model for how to use specialized hardware for things we need to do. We need theory around it. And also, just, it's like Warren Buffett. I believe in this community, theoretical thinking community, right? We need to understand whether if you are allowed hallucinations, can you do one more? Is there an actual time-space like trade-off between these things, right? There's so much we need to do, right down to the code we need to write. Okay, and just every little bit of code, bit and byte right now has a huge value. And so I'm looking forward to what this community can produce for us. Yeah. That's where I came up with the theory problem when I came here, that I like to see some actual trade-offs between learnability and hallucinations.
Nice. Yeah. we have great minds here. Hopefully, some of you are going to take up on the challenge. So before we open up for a few questions, I want to kind of have an opportunity for us to tell us about publishing a little bit. So you know that on top of Muthu of being like a very accomplished computer scientist and ad exec, he also he's an artist and a storyteller at heart. And he has like this publisher he created with his daughters. Can you tell us a little bit more about them and what do they do?
This is a book publishing effort that is a collaboration between artists and children and sometimes families. And if can we publish in books and we're making movies, but the main thing is if you want to produce a book, for example, it take maybe a year to produce a book. So it's a great exercise for children to have patience.
Yeah, that
really helps you develop patience. But the moment you think of an idea it actually teaches grown-ups patience, right? There's so
anything more than take that 5 minutes for me, it will be.
Yeah, people just think we're all researchers, we write papers, and so we think that writing a book, I can write a book. No, it's the hard part is getting it into a story that actually makes sense, and then polishing it, and then among the work it takes to work with artists. Artists don't like to collaborate because when their voice gets modified by somebody else, and they don't think they're being real. So you got to work with them to be collaborative, and then you got to get to the form in which it actually looks good. It's really hard. I realized I have one person of his job is to match colors across multiple pages, because if you have an artist who produces, let's say, 10 paintings, the color blue they use, they would use the same color throughout the paintings, and they get it right because they have it. But if you have to photograph it, scan it to get into the book, you're using a digital equipment, which I think people like Anna would know a lot more about the quantization than I do, but it quantizes things, and you get two different blue colors. Then it always goes for graphic design, which is a digital tool to adjust everything. The color changes, and then it goes to a printer who uses a computerized method to compile your code into something that will look good on a paper. It depends on the quality of paper they're printing. That changes the color. Ultimately, you get this book where 2 pages are 2 different blue colors. This sort of looks blue, but unless it looks really close, an artist is not going to take it. So it's very exciting to go through all this because it teaches you patience, teaches kids patience, and teaches collaborations. And we showcase, as you know, you're in New York, you can come in. We have a gallery show this month in Chelsea. Welcome to come and join us. Collaborations. And the one thing I don't want to hear is that GenAI is going to write children's books.
It's coming from everything. Yeah.
I'm going to live in a world where that does not.
Thank you. So, any question from the audience? Somebody wants to add something else? Yeah.
Can you hear me from here? Can you hear me from here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Folks online maybe can't, so I'll do. I was wondering if you could say something about what you think might be the future for brands and online marketplaces if you could use GenAI to hyper-personalize products. So you mentioned, maybe there's 180K French presses online, but I have very particular tastes. I want my handle to look a certain way, and so on and so forth. And suppose someone could build a way to turn these specs into a product and get it to me quickly. What might a brand be helpful for, and what might a marketplace do in a world like that?
So one is technically, can we do it? And I'm assuming that your question comes from the fact that we cannot do it technically.
Yeah.
And for some, we're not yet there with 3D, manufacturing completely automatically. we had this debate once about where is the hard part of something like this. I used to think it was the control systems or software. But it seems like now the bottleneck is the materials and 3D word of the other. So that might also get overcome, but I think that to some extent the control problems are solved, whether right, not solved, but they are made progress. So this is probably the most interesting part of the discussion for a lot of people, which is technically can we do this personalization? I was sort of curiously, I went to Film Forum the other day, and there's someone who's advertising a movie that changes every time you view it. So they're going to screen a different film every time people view it. That was amazing. Okay. So I think that there is a move towards this being able to be adaptive and to be able to personalize. And you could imagine the limit, assuming we can do it. And I think your question is, as I said, to most people here, the interesting part is the technical challenge of going to do it. For me, the interesting part is I don't think it solves a business problem, right? So it's the same thing as producing a book. We can produce a book and if nobody buys it. No, the hardest part is getting people to actually buy something. And so I don't know where the right trade-off is in generating sufficient volume of these things to be bought and yet be completely different in each case. It's not entirely clear that each one of us would like to have a different phone that is usually completely our phone. So there is some amount of, I think researchers here might know a lot more about me and thinking about, do humans would we still like to be in a cohort of something called an iPhone or not? So there's a little bit, should we be aggregating products at some level for it to be recognized as a brand, to be socially acceptable? And I see people who can reason about this much better than I can. I still think that the challenge is the business model, which is where is the trade-off between the aggregation that gives you a large buying pool and the cost of production of this and getting it into the market, getting it into delivery, marketplace, yada, yada, yada. So for me, even if we solve the production problem and the distribution problem, I don't see the market problem yet, the market solution yet. You could write a book and say that every book is going to be different based on who you are. I might buy it once because it's exciting. Am I going to buy every book to be personalized? I don't know. I think it's the two-sided, when I look at a two-sided marketplace, I think it's the buying side that's still unclear to me.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to thank Muthu for coming.
I feel like an imposter. I didn't really talk about good theoretical problems. So thank you for indulging and for making me part of this.
Thank you for coming.